today?
It's Dr. Deanne and Dr. Kenya here. I'm Kenya.
I'm Deanne.
So today we want to jump right into actionable research. So coming out of academia, and also when we were reflecting on early in our career, it's really easy to get into the exercise of conducting research for the sake of conducting research. But there are four core things that you can do to ensure that your data is actionable and useful to a team. You got to make sure you have some assumptions or hypotheses to help frame the work that you're actually doing. You've got to be strategic about who you engage in terms of that data collection. Your data has to answer the and so what. So it's got to tell a story, and it's got to be able to answer this is what it does for our product, our service, whatever that solution looks like. And finally, you've got to ensure that you're constantly gut checking. Are we engaging the right audience? Are we performing the right activities? This is why it's so important to have more than one tool in your toolkit. So let's jump in. Where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, pick any of them. I'd like to start with the actual so what. I think in our careers, we've done research that, in hindsight, go back to our early careers. It was like, so what? That's
Right.
how it ended up getting filed away. And, maybe in onboarding, you throw it at a few people, but nothing that really came out that gave something to the team to allow that brainstorming collaboration. It lends itself to your problem statement or the
Mhm.
objective of the research. And there's so, oh, how many times, look, I get pretty passionate about this when I go onto the site, and this is not to say anything about the organization or the research, or
Mhm.
it's just a big pitfall. And I get passionate about it because we go into so many engagements and in-house projects where research, research, research. So they've got that right. They know they need the research. How many times, Kenya, have we been given the research? Like, here's the research. We got it started, and you look at it, and it's like, interesting.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
How's that going to help based on what I know you're trying to accomplish? Or what the overall objectives are. But
Yeah. And
another
as you say
key,
that,
go ahead.
the most important component of the outcomes of that research activity is the story what story does it tell? And the story can't just be about, Dr. John has a family of four and he likes to golf on the weekend. It's got to tell a story of motivations, why he interacts with solutions like your product or your service. What is he or trying to accomplish in the work that he does? It's got to tell that story so that the work that you do is kind of an add on to that story to say our solution should do these things, should include these capabilities, that sort of thing.
Exactly. We know this about John, or this synthesized person. Based on all
Mhm.
the data, we know about tools John uses. We know a little bit about, let's say, his office workflow. Okay, where are those pain points? Where
Mhm.
can we solve for different things? So yeah, I mean, I think about a lot of persona work. I like personas. But I think people sometimes get too hung up on
Mhm.
not why you're creating the persona, but, oh, let's build this story about a person. And there's not a thing in it, that I can necessarily grab and say, okay, let's brainstorm. Let's come up with some solutions for this person. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of times, and I'm going to shut up and pass off to you, a lot of times it's simply based on the fact that you didn't really have a problem statement or a defined objective of why you were doing research. Because, oh, thank you, it's hypotheses, because the type of research you
Mhm.
do is driven by that. Are you really just trying to get this persona of a
Mhm.
group of users? That's one thing. Or are you trying to understand how someone works? So you're going into
Mhm.
interviews to dig in that, but you've got to deliberately look at your assumptions, put
Mhm.
out some hypotheses, and then decide what are the questions or what is the type of research
Mhm.
that's going to answer some of those, or at least provide information so that developers have something a little more actionable, or the team getting together
Yes.
to brainstorm and look. Well, you can talk about some of the activities you do once you have that data. But uh, anyhow, I am
No, I will keep going because I oftentimes get asked, how do I conduct that engagement with a prospect or customer in that interviewing or observing or the process of doing those things. And your questioning is like a funnel. Starts with the broad. You walk in with those assumptions or hypotheses. You got to
yes,
start with the broad, kind of understand the landscape of that person or people, what they're doing, what is their day to day, what is important to them. And then you start to kind of narrow or go into a more focused conversation around that particular problem space that you're there to discuss.
yes,
And then you go more specific into solutions that might be a part of that problem space or other tools in use. One of the things I found in doing this kind of work is it's really helpful to understand philosophically where someone enjoys experiences with
yes,
things that may be very different than what you're there to talk about, but it gives you an understanding of their frame of reference. I
yes,
can remember years ago working with a team on a mobile app for finding a provider, a medical provider or a facility. And one of the questions led to us having conversations with customers or people who were users of an app. One of the questions was, what are some apps that you go onto to look for information? And they're helpful in terms of giving you the where of the information, the what it is, ratings or reviews, how to get there. So all
yes,
that stuff. And what came out of that was Yelp. So we were able to take their expectation of what an experience with a Yelp like app is and transfer that sort of framework or concept to that medical provider app. And so
right.
when you think about that, your questions are not always just about what you do. They are kind of broad to narrow, but they get into aspects of behaviors or preferences that people have. And there's an art and a science to it.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Look at those existing mental models. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Because when you do that and you can match to those, the whole task is easier from the user's perspective. So,
And you hit on a key point. That mental model is
mhm,
really what you're getting at, is how do I look at the mental models that people have that exist that may not, especially if you're creating something new and different, they may not have a mental model of that concept, but you want to understand what mental models they do have of things that have that core capability, like in the instance of what I just described, that search and find and
yes,
determine of a list which one I want to choose. What does that mental model look like? And how do we transfer some aspects of that to what we're trying to do or create?
yes, yeah. And I think those hypotheses and assumptions
Mhm.
also drive the type of user research. We're talking a lot about kind of the IDI, the in-depth interviews, but
Mhm.
there's a lot.
Wow.
User research is you've got a lot of things in your toolkit, right?
Mhm.
Looking at existing data. So I mean, looking at existing data, doing observational type of activities, usability testing, of course. We all are familiar with that, but I think not having that problem statement can also help you
Mhm.
determine how to go into it. For instance, It may be around user behaviors that you're predicting, and using an app. Well,
Right.
do you have data that's already out there, versus asking somebody to recount how they like to do things if you already have the data to know that?
Yeah.
I think it drives a lot of things.
And to your point, I think that's the whole premise around the fact that more data is not better, because you probably already have a lot of data within your organization, or that's publicly available or coming
Yeah,
from other sources that can help inform what you do and how you strategize around the current need in terms of gathering data. So, for example, I've had situations where
oh,
projects involved looking for data like census data or
yes,
other data that can help you segment more effectively. And that data then allows you to create a more strategic plan around what you're doing currently, because you're looking at characteristics of different populations. Maybe it's statewide, maybe it's
yep,
nationwide, whatever that might be. Maybe it's just women, and you're able to use that other data to then help you determine what to do in your current project. That really, really helps to ensure you're not just gathering data from different people who are not either relevant to your problem space. They're going to give you feedback that really helps you to take action on.
yeah. And I like the examples you gave, because sometimes it eliminates research. You think you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's
Yeah.
already out there. Use your time better, right? Use that data in addition to. So if
Mhm.
there's certain things, we already know about the way people like to learn, for instance, at different
Mhm.
ages, that sort of thing. You don't need to go do research necessarily. Now
Yeah.
you can, borrow that well established data, drill down into what you need to explore in that group and identify that group, that sort of thing. And I think, this is where it becomes very important. What that you can really get back to is so what, or you can actually have the wrong so what if you're just
Mhm.
getting a mass, that whole just quantity is important. Let's get 1,000
Mhm.
people in this, when really spend the time to get who you need or what you need, when you're doing that research,
Yeah.
just to get valid data for your purposes.
Yeah, and that's really key. And as you think about the activities that you're performing, the data that you're capturing will help you to start to understand, is there some opportunity to shift a bit or
Yep.
pivot?
Yep.
Are we engaging the right people? Are we asking the right questions? Are we going about it with the right method in terms of, is it an interview or a survey or
Yep.
whatever that might be? So you're constantly looking at the data that's coming in to recognize whether or not you're actually going down the right path in terms of the methods you're employing and the people that you're engaging and how you're engaging them.
Yes. It's agile, right? I mean, it's
It's
iterative,
agile. Hmm.
just like everything else. And you do have to be ready to pivot. And I mean, even that continuous improvement of the activities can be, you've discovered you've missed a whole segment, because you're asking the right questions about, maybe it's, tools used, what's that workflow? You're making observations if you're doing more ethnographic type of studies. So as things change in your knowledge, you might have to run down a different rabbit hole,
Right.
to discover more information.
As I become more skilled at using these different strategies to help do research, what I've recognized is there is a lot of value in looking for academic research
Mhm.
and other maybe articles that have been published. Be careful about your sources, though.
Yes.
I will caveat with that. But there is a lot to be said about what that data can do to help you be more effective at what you're planning around research. So, if you want to be actionable or you want to ensure that your research is actionable, starting with or understanding that problem space from some lab work that's been done and understand the flaws in that work. So, for example, there's been a number of studies on apps in a certain space or that solve a certain problem, and they've already identified and prioritized what people are looking for in that space from an app. So, does it provide me with access to information? Is it usable? Do I have a way to create a profile? That sort of thing. So, if research has already been done and you see that there are multiple sources that tell you that is the case,
Mm-hmm.
you now have things to frame your conversations and your research, or as you think about your research and it's how actionable it is, you now have things that can help you to start to formulate what that solution looks like. And
Exactly.
you already know that there's data that exists to tell you usability, the amount of information and the ability to create a profile are three things that you either ask about during your research or you start to think about as that concept takes shape.
Right. Or go the next level down, right? Because you've got the research.
Mhm.
If there's abundant research, you don't need to ask. You can
Right.
spend time honing in on things. So,
On the
but
what within
I
each
don't
of those.
know what. Yeah. How
Mhm.
do you get to the what? So, I mean, my rule of thumb is always I've got to have something that I could take into a workshop. So, and
Mhm.
what I mean by that is if I have a bunch of data that I take in from, I don't care, research, metrics, that we've analyzed, surveys, whatever it may be,
Mhm.
once I see we have some understanding, let me tell a bit of a story based on that data that I
Mhm.
can take into a room where we can end up having a collaborative session. We can
Mhm.
map out that information and say, here's our opportunity and here's the data that supports that opportunity. Now,
Mhm.
what do we do about it? So that may
Mhm.
be getting into pain points being experienced. Again, you've asked all the right questions, you're assuming, but that's kind of a rule of thumb. What do you do with it? Can
Yeah.
you take that and have a workshop, or what we call them workshops now that we're
Mhm.
consulting, but can
Brainstorming,
you have a brainstorming
collaboration.
session?
Mhm.
Will people walk out? Will you get those innovative juices flowing
Flowing.
based on
Mhm.
it, or will they walk out and go, so what? I've walked out in many presentations of data where
Yeah.
I actually said, so what? I mean, so what? Now what? And we net no move. You
Mhm.
wasted a lot of money, a lot of
Time.
time, and you're stagnant. Now everyone might even, in worst case scenario, people are even more confused because they think there should
Yeah.
be something actionable to take out of it.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
not. So,
And to your, I like that because you're looking at when we define actionable, we're looking at the fact that that data or those insights can now inform
mhm,
or drive conversation, ideation, brainstorming. That's what
yeah,
actionable means.
yes,
And the most important part of what you're saying is that as you look at that continuous improvement of your research activities, don't wait until it's too late.
yes,
After you've done a couple of whatever your exercise is or looked at a couple of data points from a particular source, when you see that that is not giving you something that can either drive towards clarity on an assumption or it's not helping you to say, and so what? What does this mean? And let me just find more data to support or refute that. Then it is time for you to step back and say, okay, maybe we need to shift and do things a little bit differently at this point.
yes, yep, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So just I think the best that you can take from this conversation is that you got to start, and I just want to recap, you got to start with some sort of assumptions or hypotheses, or you are just having conversations. You're scheduling discussions and conversations. It's not really research. If you're really looking at green field, kind of a new space that you've never
Right.
been in, yes, you might start with a conversation, but you still want to have some framing around a problem space or a particular area of focus that drives your conversations. More is not better. Be strategic. If you find that you don't really know your assumptions, have a couple of engagements that allow you to then hone in on, can we say with some level of confidence, little or none, but that we have some sort of assumptions that we can assert. Be strategic about it and don't waste your time and money.
Yep. Yep.
And then this one, you want to take this one?
This one is, it's just what it says. If you can't go into a room and present, except like to your point, if it is a green space, that's a little bit different. But even then, you've got something you're thinking about. There's some objective, but if you can't go in with your research and add something that is going to help with that ideation, help with that, thinking around solutions, then it becomes a so what. It gets filed away as, Johnny likes, his favorite color is purple and he likes dogs. Great.
Okay.
But don't do the so what. Yeah.
Yes. And finally, pivot.
Yes, improvement. Yes, pivot when you need to pivot. And
Yeah.
and I would also say don't kind of beat it to death. You know what I mean? If you
Yes.
see you need to pivot, if you see you have the answers, let's go lean, let's get it done. Let's really use that data, define what may be actionable from a researcher perspective, get in the room with others, and do that. But yeah, definitely hone in. You're going to probably need, if big projects, there are a few research activities that are going to need, and one may build off another to drill down. So
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much for listening today. You can contact us at info@leangeeks.net if you have any additional questions. Otherwise, we will see you next week.
yes, bye.
Bye.